Welcome back to the Whole Career Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Brandon Strawn, and I'm here with my co host, Sky Kellogg. We are excited to have you all here with us today, and we're also excited to be with John Culver, the Director of Environmental Sustainability. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. So we'll jump right in. So, could you begin by explaining what your role as the Director of Environmental Sustainability looks like and entails at Advent Health?
Absolutely. So, the role of environmental sustainability within Advent Health is pretty diverse. One of the jokes we've made is eventually we're going to stick our nose into everybody's business in one form or another. But where we've started is primarily in the supply chain side of the world. And so, we're looking at a lot of the different items that we can affect from the operational side of the facility. So maybe that is how the utilities come into play, where our waste goes, better practices around procuring different sorts of supplies and different suppliers.
Okay. Okay. And is this your first role with Advent Health?
It is. I
Okay.
had joined Advent Health. The other joke that I make frequently is I joined Advent Health on July 31st, 2023, which for those that know is the same day that RMR went live. So
No.
no one noticed when I showed up. Everyone was looking in Colorado with that on that Monday.
They're like, yeah, the new director started. Who?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay.
And as far as environmental sustainability, how far back does that journey start for Advent Health?
So Advent Health started down this path in earnest about 3 years ago. This was identified as a material risk by our risk department as something that we needed to develop a strategy around. And so at that time, unbeknownst to the risk team, Rob Roy, the chief investment officer, and Marisa Faribaugh, the chief supply chain officer, were both looking into this for their own needs and their own day to day. And it was very convenient that Paul Rathbun is their manager, and Paul was tapped with, "Hey, figure this out for Advent Health." And Paul said, "Hey, Marisa, hey, Rob, you guys go become battle buddies and figure this out for us." And so they reached out to some of our third party consultants to say, okay, how do we even do this? This is a new item for Advent Health at large and fairly new for healthcare. Sustainability on the corporate side of things has been around in food and bev or manufacturing or industrial systems for a time, but not for healthcare. And so we didn't want to take a wrong first step. And so we reached out to one of our consulting groups and worked with them. And the first big step was getting an understanding of what our environmental footprint was. Where are we? What impacts do we have? And what are we affecting? And all of that started just 3 years ago. So we've made a lot of progress in not a lot of time.
Right, right. And so, just for our audience, because you mentioned to us briefly before we started, the difference between sustainability and
Mhm.
environmental sustainability, just so going forward, we understand. Okay, this is exactly what we mean when when you're talking about
Yeah, exactly. So within sustainability, like, a rough definition is doing something better for longer, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. You're pretty sustainable if you can keep it up for a long time. And so Advent Health really breaks this into the environmental component that I work on. And so that is our impact on the environment, because the environment has an impact on us. Whether it's hot, if you've ever gone outside and it's hot, there's an impact from the environment on you. The other aspect is the social side of things. And so Jessica Brazier leads up that group with her team, and they're looking at the impacts that we can have to be more sustainable to our workforce and to our patients that come and visit our facilities one way or another.
And you said you all had to start with a big step first. Was there reasoning behind needing to start with a big step first, or were we trying to catch up, or were we trying to just get ahead quickly? What was that like?
hmm No, it was trying to learn what we didn't know.
Hmm.
Um, there was a pledge that we signed in October of 2022 that is the U.S. Health and Human Services Health Sector Climate Pledge, and that is geared towards specifically emissions. So it's not looking at procurement or water or waste per se, but it's looking at the emissions from healthcare. And so we did a little bit of work to understand what our footprint was before signing that pledge. And then once we understood where we could have an impact and where we currently were on that journey, we then signed that pledge. And specifically within that pledge, it carves out a 50% reduction in a certain variety of emissions by 2030, and then total reduction of all emissions by 2050. Prior to us signing, we had a pretty good idea of how we could get to that 2030 goal, and we're well on track right now. We have no idea how to get to 2050, nor does anyone. But us signing that pledge is really symbolic of Advent Health saying, we are throwing our hat in the ring. We want to be one of the people at the table coming up with these new solutions, be it with our peer health systems or with our suppliers and vendors. We want them to know that we're interested. We are fully committed and bought into this, but we need help. We cannot do it alone.
And I think one of the things that come to mind is understanding how you all got educated fairly quickly. I know your background is more
Mhm.
close to that, but as far as the people, when you mentioned Marissa and right, the battle buddies that had to seek out that education, what are some of the things that they did? Like, was it articles that they were
Mhm.
looking at? Did anyone go back to school for this? So, if you could kind of mention how Advent Health was able to get caught up and get educated on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Marisa, she worked very closely with Kate Reed, who is currently the executive director of business services, supply chain, and sustainability. And she is actually on her way out. She's going to go do some stuff with family, but her replacement, Sarah Azon, is already here and is coming up to speed rapidly. Sarah's been with Advent Health for over a decade, and so she knows and understands the culture very well, and is jumping in excitedly and enthusiastically into this work. But Kate, Marisa, and Rob, none of them had a formal background in sustainability per se, nor do most folks. It's as a field or anything. It came after the year 2000, at least by that title, and so there was a lot of education that took place as far as, again, like you said, reading articles and learning things, but a lot of conversations. Marisa and Rob have a lot of friends in this space in healthcare, and so they were able to reach out and say, hey, what do we know? What do you guys do in this space? What are you pursuing? What are you working on? Here's what we're thinking. Are we going the complete wrong direction? What do we need? Um, Rob went slightly more of an extreme route. He just graduated with his master's in sustainability from Harvard about a month ago.
Beautiful.
So he wanted to learn a few more things. So he decided, I'll just go get a master's on top of an existing master's and a PhD he already has in
Right.
other fields. I have a master's in that, but I did that earlier in my career with this in mind the whole time. This was kind of a extreme hobby, maybe you could say. But Marisa has learned a lot from her peers, specifically by having these conversations with other leaders that are well regarded in this space or interested. A lot of what we're learning right now is a lot of vendors and suppliers who service more than just healthcare have been doing this work for a long time. And so we've been able to learn a lot from those folks, not other individuals within healthcare and health systems, but within the healthcare space at large. How do we manage gloves and gowns and other dialysis equipment better? The vendors that make those have a lot of good answers and a lot of things that we can learn from them.
And can you discuss some of the key sustainability initiatives that are currently underway here at Advent Health?
Yeah, absolutely. So many of the initiatives right now hinge around that US HHS climate pledge. And so those are focused on emissions. Late last year, two of the biggest items that Advent Health has accomplished uh, in regards to sustainability are virtual power purchase agreements. And so those are, I will attempt to make them clear and understandable and not use too many acronyms. But those are two large renewable energy projects out in Texas. The one is operational right now, and it's a wind farm with over 62 300-foot tall wind turbines spinning around doing their job. And the next is going to be a 3,000-acre solar farm. Both of those projects together are going to be generating electricity that will be sold in that market. So they're not going directly into any of our facilities. We have a handful of hospitals in Texas, but not near where these are. But those items are being sold in that market, and we are getting the financial surplus from those that is able to finance other efforts within sustainability. And also, we get what's called a renewable energy certificate. So that is, picture it like a stock. When you buy a stock on the stock market, it has a value, and you are the sole owner. No one else can claim anything to that. And so we take those and use those to lower our greenhouse gas emissions footprint, because there was now a renewable energy credit that had a greenhouse gas emission value to it. We're the sole possessor of that. And so when the term is retire it, which means put it away and no one else can ever claim it, that is what lowers our emissions here from a portfolio perspective. So once those two virtual power purchase agreements are operational, which the second should be online late next year, all electricity generation from Advent Health will be supplanted by those two projects. So every hospital, every primary care location, every rehab location we
In
have
every region.
in every region. It's a lot. It's a little over what's called a terawatt hour. And so think of a light bulb as a watt. Your house uses couple hundred kilowatt hours, maybe 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, which is 1 megawatt. A megawatt, 1,000 of those, so like a year of your house's electricity is 1 gigawatt. A terawatt is 1,000 gigawatts. So pretty much 1,000 years for one house is 1 terawatt. And so we're doing that every year, year after year through these projects. So within this space, so we were not the first ones to do a VPPA within healthcare. There were a handful before us, but we have gone bigger than anyone else. And one of the big reasons for that was the emissions impact and the ability for us to start our journey down this path, because it does not directly impact any of our clinicians or any of our patients directly. This is something that happens behind the meter per se, and so we're able to make a lot of progress without interrupting the flow and delivery of excellent care. We are now moving towards initiatives that are closer to ground level, where we need to be much more considerate and much more conscientious around the steps that we take to make sure that we are not inhibiting or negatively impacting any of the work that we do day to day. Because that's why we're here. We are not here to be a utility company.
Right.
we would not be a good one of that. That's not our job. Our job is to provide excellent patient care as best we can in the most sustainable way.
Yeah. Wow. That was a lot.
And that's a lot.
Yeah. But no, that's I mean, when you start talking about energy in terms of years, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I just love that last piece you said about making sure that you're not disrupting like the clinicians and right the people that are providing the care, and maybe not even like in a negative way, but slowing it down, so that's, but it needs to be done, but of course in a way that assists that. So I love that. That's amazing.
And we just kind of touched on this, but how does sustainability interact with patient care and the health outcomes of Advent Health as a whole?
In many ways. So another one of the big deliverables that we completed at the end of last year, in order to comply with our pledge or move forward with our pledge around the HHS, was the first climate resiliency plan. And so that's different than our sustainability plan. Again, the sustainability at Advent Health encompasses social and environmental components. The CRP, Climate Resiliency Plan, is looking at just the environmental factors that might impact in a tangible way all of our facilities. And so similar to a lot of the health equity work that we are already working on, as a system, we are now looking at adding environmental components to that. So through a lot of the health equity work that team works on and the community health needs assessments, we know diabetes is a predominant issue in this area, or obesity is a problem here, or it's asthma. We are now looking at, in the early stages of layering on climate data of extreme heat is a problem in this space. So Texas and Florida, that's a real issue. Some of our locations in multi-state, flooding is an issue. And so what we are looking at doing, we can't stop a flood. We can't change the outdoor air temperature any more than anyone else can. But what we can do is make sure that the individuals who are coming into our locations know that they're in these risk areas, or know the early indications of heat stroke, so that they can then get help sooner. And also we can try and partner with organizations in those areas to help raise the starting point for those communities. If you are already chronically sick or have some other sort of health disadvantage inherently, those natural extreme events are going to impact you even more. So if you are already starting behind the start line when there's a heat wave that comes through, it's going to be that much more dangerous to you. But if we can help partner with organizations and better understand and educate individuals that come through, hey, this is an issue that you might face. Here's things that you can do to be ready. That gives them a better advantage or a head start when and if those extreme events come through.
Could you discuss any collaborative projects between Advent Health and other organizations and companies aimed at pretty much accomplishing the same things that you are?
hmm So, one of the items that we're working on right now that you two might have been impacted by when you parked this morning is the solar and EV charging project that's happening at the corporate campus right now. It has unfortunately booted half the campus over into the parking garages and out of their normal parking spots. But we're working with a local renewable project development company called ESA, and they are installing 3 megawatts of solar across the campus as well as 31 new dual port EV charging stations. So currently there's 4. Tony Holmes and his team have been operating 4 charging stations over in the parking garage for, I think, about 5 years, but we're about to go from 4 to 66. And that's out of a need and a desire that we've heard from a lot of our folks on the corporate campus, our visitors, a lot of rentals that come through now are electric vehicles. And so we want to be able to be a first mover in that space, because another one of the issues around EVs is, in general, if you're not a standalone home owner, you may not be able to have home charging
Oh, right.
because you don't have a plug. If you live in an apartment complex or a townhome or you rent, there's a better than not chance that you can't have at-home charging. And that kind of extends that range anxiety term you've heard. Because if you can charge every night and wake up in the morning, you're fine. Like there's no real anxiety. Very rarely do you go more than 300 miles unexpectedly
Right.
on a day. So if we as Advent Health and one of our corporate locations can be a reliable source and site for folks to plug in, that helps. And it expands the opportunity for individuals to have electric vehicles beyond just single homeowners. So that's one of the projects we're working on. That was driven largely by a need to be able to showcase what's possible at Advent Health locations, because we're looking at extending solar and EV charging wherever else feasible across our system. There's different advantages and disadvantages and what's possible at all our locations, but we wanted to at least say, hey, here's what it looks like at the corporate campus so that people can understand and not have to just Google what it looks like. They can come and touch it, they can see it. We can also learn and develop a playbook so that it goes even more smoothly when it is rolled out in the markets.
Yeah. And I just had a quick follow-up question. How do you manage doing the work of the environmental sustainability piece, which people in your company may not know about,
hmm
but also managing, okay, how do we survey them and figure out what they want to have, right? Because you mentioned that a lot of people on campus, right, they had voiced that, yeah, this would help them. But then how do you balance that of, hey, this is actually what, because you guys are in the future already, right? You guys are
Mm.
thinking years ahead, and maybe your employees, right, the internal, they may not be there yet, and so they don't understand why it's important.
hmm
How do you manage making sure that you're doing things that are impacting the environmental well, but even people who may not be understand why you're doing that, and make sure that they're on board?
hmm
Yeah.
No, that is a real challenge, and we face it frequently. And I won't say we do it perfectly every time, but the success we have had has been largely due to collaboration across teams, and that kind of gets back to my jokey comment before, but genuine of sustainability sticks its nose in everything at some point or another because it is so crucial to a smoothly operating facility, regardless of your background or your angle to it. And so we work really closely with the campus team here that they've done those surveys. We didn't send out a, hey, who wants an EV or who
Right.
already has an EV survey. We heard back, hey, this is a need that we've heard from our customers, which is one of the ways that we view our team members today. And I remember joining less than a year ago, driving through the parking garages now that we've kicked everybody out of the parking lots and into the garage. I passed so many EVs. I do not have one yet, but it's nice to know that this is an option here. And so having that collaboration and that open line of communication of coming up with new ideas, one of the monikers that some folks on our team have said before is none of us are as smart as all of us. And so we've learned a lot. Yeah, see? I didn't come up with this, so no credit here. One of the things that we've heard is there's a lot of individuals in our system. We have 95,000 plus team members. There's a lot of good ideas out there. And so one of the opportunities that we have is to try and hear from them more and more frequently to come up with those ideas. My background is not clinical. It's heavy into the environmental space, but my wife was a pediatric RN. And so still very frequently, even though she's not a nurse anymore, um, I ask her a ton of questions like, hey, what does this actually look like on the floor? Because there's perspectives and ideas that I'll never come across or think of on my own. And so really communicating and collaborating with those different teams to understand what are the issues and impacts that they are butting up against that we might be able to come up to a solution with. Um, and again, healthcare has started down the sustainability path in general fairly late. And so a lot of us across the country and across the world are in similar positions. Advent Health has done a lot of work on the emission side of things, but waste and water are next. There are other systems who started with waste. We can go talk to them and say, hey, what did you guys do about this? Trade that idea, and we'll give them tips on energy, and then vice versa with water. So we view this very much as a team sport. It's not a competition. We are all in this together. Advent Health can be the most sustainable organization on the planet, and the planet won't notice on its own. Everyone has to be brought into this as an industry and across our peers in order to start seeing a difference and making an improvement.
And speaking of that, you've spoken to how these efforts impact the organization as a whole, and how you're helping us as team members as well. How do team members give back? How do we support the sustainability efforts that you all are working on?
Let us know if you have any sort of idea. There is a corporate email address, and I can never remember it. I think it's corporate at environmental at adventhealth.com. Something
Yeah,
I didn't come up with it, so it's not very creative.
we can add it in the show
Yeah,
notes. It's
we
okay.
we can add it later.
Yeah.
I'm sure I have a really good team beneath me. I have a program manager, Aaliyah Cutshall, and our senior data analyst, Joelle Kenyana. I'm sure they know it better than I do, and I'll get grief for this for them later. But yeah, we can add it in the show. But that's one way. And then frequently, too, you'll see throughout just the normal news briefings that come from Advent Health, a number of initiatives pop up. And we've seen already quite a bit of comments and chatter on the SharePoint of people saying, hey, this is great, or I wish we had this at Shawnee, or I wish we had this at Redmond or Durand. Those are the kind of things that we want to hear. And pretty frequently already, we do receive emails of individuals saying, hey, my wife does this, my husband does this in town. We love to compost on our own. How can we do this in our hospital? How can we do this in our primary care centers? And so one of the roles that we try and fill from a corporate seat is switchboard operator. Where we hear that someone came up with a good idea, we try and amplify that so that others can see, oh, this has been done before. One good example is Celebration. They have a freight farm. Really good podcast idea if you guys don't know about it. It is a shipping container unit that is a self-contained farm. They produce, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, so Sean Tour, who is the farm manager, can correct me. But it's close to 900 heads of lettuce every harvest, which is in days, as opposed to months and weeks. And so that had nothing to do with corporate. They wanted to do this, they researched it, they found a great solution, and they've managed it, and they're starting to expand it even more. And for a couple months now at this point, they have been able to provide what they've grown to patients. They've been providing what they've grown to team members for a long time, but they've now reached the point of efficiency and certification that they can provide this food to patients. And that's a great thing for us to be able to provide. It is not offsetting all of the food costs and all the food expenses that we need, but it's reducing waste significantly. And it is providing known, healthy, high quality food directly to patients from the back of the parking lot.
That's amazing. And thank you for that lead.
Yeah, there you go. Where are they? Where are they keeping the is it freight?
Yeah,
called?
it's a
where-
shipping container.
a shipping container. Yes. Where are they keeping that?
I can't remember the name of the auditorium space that's at the Celebration campus, but it's in that parking lot. You can drive right by it.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. And so, I want to just take everyone, our listeners, through your journey and how you got here, right?
Mm.
And so I know you mentioned you already have your master's, right? Just a subtle flex there. I like that. And then Roy or
Hmm.
Rob Roy,
Rob's
yeah,
got one too.
yeah. Went and got his right, but just give us the maybe just a background of how you ended up here in a
Sure.
director position for environmental sustainability.
Yeah, yeah. Great question. So I grew up in Central Florida. My dad worked for NASA. My mom was a special ed teacher, and so I've lived and grew up kind of in the space of highly technical and also highly focused on communicating. And so I thought I wanted to do engineering because my sister did, three uncles, dad, all that stuff. And it wasn't until the last year of undergrad that I was like, "Hey, what do you actually do, Dad? Like day to day?" And I hated it. I didn't like it all. I didn't like his answer at all because he didn't work directly with that many people. I am fairly chatty, and I like to work with a lot of different teams and learn a lot of different things. And so I pivoted real quick and went back and got my master's degree, focusing on corporate sustainability and energy type work because I understood I have a very strong grasp of the technical details, but I'm able and I'm still constantly learning how to communicate those to different audiences. Like to your comment before of how do you plan and work on things for team members who don't even care about this yet, or maybe not ever. There are things that you can do to at least make the default path for them easier. So one of the tricks is always putting the recycle bin closer than the trash can.
Right.
You're more likely to put the right thing in the recycling bin than walk all the way over to the trash can every time. Um, so with that, the next step was really starting to reach out and learn a lot in the consulting space myself around the environmental sustainability and learning how sustainability looks different for housing authorities, for airports, for local governments, for private companies, getting a good understanding of here's what's possible in this space. Here are sort of the fundamental pillars that need to be established in order to grow a program. And eventually, after doing a little bit more of that and then focusing on heavy on the energy side of things, because currently energy is one of the biggest impact that can be made from an environmental standpoint and from a financial standpoint. And for some folks who may be more reticent to do waste and water work, they'll be more likely to do energy work because there is a direct impact and benefit from an operational standpoint, a resiliency standpoint, and from a financial standpoint. Um, and then that really led me here. I mentioned before my wife was a pediatric RN, and so I've always understood and had a great appreciation for the impact a hospital can have in its community. Um, I knew I would never be the clinical side of that. That would not be a good impact. It would definitely be impactful, but not a good one. And so it was a really exciting opportunity and honor to get to come and do this sort of work for healthcare. This was something that I know and have been heading down this path for a little over 10 years at this point. And so it kind of aligned perfectly with, oh, this is something in my neck of the woods, because I'm from Central Florida, that I can help extend the healing ministry of Christ through things that I've been learning for years. Not ever with this directly in mind, but kind of lined up well.
Oh. I'll follow that up with you mentioned it was like an extreme hobby. What were some things that you were doing outside of like the classroom
Mm,
that led you to believe like, oh, like I actually am interested in these things, in a hobby form?
sure. Um, so I'm a big nerd, which I learned rudely by finding out that other folks didn't think about numbers and terawatts in the same way. Um, but no, it was really just from speaking. When I was in grad school, I had the opportunity to. I was younger than most of the folks in my cohort, and so many of them had come back to get a master's degree to extend or maybe change their career trajectory. And so I was able to learn from a lot of them what they had already seen in the working world and kind of just those conversations. It's not much of a hobby, but it was what we were doing when we weren't studying, of just knowing and understanding what is possible. And really, when a lot of folks talk about the impacts and how the world is changing right now from an environmental standpoint, it can be very depressing because you hear all these different numbers of we missed this target, we're never going to get here, things are just getting worse and worse. Um, I'm going to die an optimist and do what I can as long as I can. And I really think there is a lot of work that can be done. Most of the limitations around the work that needs to occur isn't technical. or technological. It is largely communication, getting folks to understand, hey, this is what can be done. Here are the benefits that go with it. It's not we need to invent some new solution. We just need to put it to work in the best way possible. And Advent Health has, I think, done an outstanding job long before I ever showed up. So this is not me taking credit by any means. Um, Rob and Marisa have led this initiative very well because they have been very considerate to the goal and mission of Advent Health, which again is not to be a utility, it's not to be a sustainability consultancy, it's to provide care to patients in the best way possible. And that's always been the lens that they've looked through when trying to do this work. And I think that has led to um, very consistent and reliable decisions and have set us up well to continue to do that for years to come. So that when we begin doing work that now starts showing up in the patient's room, there's going to be still some, not concern, but uh, leeriness as to let's see how this works. But there's going to be trust of Maurice and Rob have led these initiatives well before. We have no reason to suspect this is not going to go well too.
Right.
We need to do the work. We need to do the research. We need to make sure that we understand everything as best we can. Um, but it should result in a good outcome because the other outcomes have done this before, and we have a strong network of other systems and peers that we're learning from.
And I think starting with energy helps as well because you see that financial
Hmm.
savings, so that builds a lot of trust for you guys to then go forth and affect the
Hmm.
patient. So
So, John, just to wrap up our conversation, what are some long-term goals for sustainability here at Advent Health?
Ooh, long-term ones. Um, so we have outside of the targets that we have set for 2030 and 2050 of reducing emissions, a lot of our goals are trying to get more connected with the acute care centers we have throughout our system. Right now, a lot of the work has been done and has been centralized from the corporate locations and corporate seats. They may have had an impact beyond, but there's not been as much feedback or two-way conversation as we would want. And so, in the same vein that we give a lot of autonomy to our hospitals throughout the system through the DEI councils, we would love to have something similar that looked at environmental sustainability initiatives. We really want to put the opportunity in the hands of every location to come up with their own ideas and their own ways to implement this, where we can then do some of the homework for them or connect the dots and say, hey, Manchester, you're doing this sort of work. We've heard the same thing from Avista. We can coordinate that call in between so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Or we can say, hey, we have heard that there are 10 different hospitals that want to do something around a freight farm. We can help collect all those folks together and connect them with where it's already been done. And so, long-term goal is really to get um, more individual buy-in across the system of 95,000. If we've done as much as we have with a generously extended team of 10, that's including Marisa and Rob and even Paul Rathman, imagine what we can do with 95,000.
yeah.
Significantly more ideas, more people to provide the work, more connections, and a larger network that we can learn from in order to grow from.
Well, I'm sure Brandon would agree. We could probably continue this conversation on
God.
for much longer, John. But your insight is invaluable, and hopefully inspires a lot of our internal team members to see how they can share their ideas or just get involved and support and learn and educate themselves, right, to see how they can be more apt to think about the environment and how to be sustainable as individuals outside of their day to day at work too. So, thank you for being here, John. We appreciate it, and thank you for listening to the Whole Career Podcast. We are grateful that you're listening, so please feel free to subscribe on any of the podcast platforms. You can watch us on YouTube as well and follow us at Life at Advent Health. Until next time, take care.